Welcome and good morning, everyone. I'm Kate McCauley, iTech's Marketing Manager, and on behalf of everyone at iTech, I would genuinely like to thank you for attending today's event, BYOD Don't Fight It, Feature It webinar. Allow me to introduce today's presenters. We had the pleasure of welcoming Jason Contino and Steve Harms from Pentasys today. They'll be sharing some cool insights and solutions into the Bring Your Own Device discussion that you're probably hearing quite a bit about lately, but not sure maybe what to do with it or think of all of it. And if that's the case, you're in the right place. And we're glad you're here because Jason and Steve will be clearing up a lot of questions and concerns surrounding this topic. So without further ado, let me pass this over to Steve.
Thanks, Kate. Appreciate it. I want to welcome everybody to the webinar today. As Kate mentioned, the topic of conversation for today is the initiative of Bring Your Own Device that seems to be gaining increasing ground and traction within the business community. The purpose of the discussion today is to view Bring Your Own Device as an initiative which can be addressed specifically through Citrix's version of desktop virtualization of their Zen Desktop, the consumerization of the IT world. You know, once upon a time, PCs and computers were something that people mostly used at work, and then increasingly that became something at home. Now, with the advent of tablets and smart devices, iPhones, Droids, etc., users are increasingly demanding that they have access to IT and data resources through a variety of different kinds of devices. It has an impact on the IT world in that they now have to step up and sort of address those needs of the user community. One of the surveys that's been done to kind of illustrate this point was done by sort of a global BYOD index, where they asked two questions. How many different computing devices? These two charts is that probably better than half are using at least two devices from 1 to 2 days outside the office. So both of those things are making it increasingly difficult for the poor CIO to figure out how to these users. We've got the consumerization factor that's driving it, along with distributed computing, people wanting to know why, you know, how do we make our apps work. We've got this big buzz going on with cloud services. We want everything in the cloud. Now, you know, personal thought on this is cloud is not necessarily a new series of technologies, but rather a great marketing ploy that has been put together to sort of encompass it. What I am glad to see is that it's at least providing focus for those kinds of technologies. And then, of course, the other thing that CIOs are trying to do is develop some kind of standardization. One of the challenges in a Bring Your Own Device initiative is that people are going to bring their own device. And so who supports the hardware? How is that dealt with? How is that addressed? They become issues that the IT department has to deal with. So overall, the things that we need to do in a Bring Your Own Device environment is we have to look at how it empowers people in departments to choose their own devices. We need to protect the information to make sure that it's not leaking or getting out or failing to comply with things like HIPAA and other kinds of standards that require data protection, and do this in a way to simplify IT and reduce cost. So traditionally, when you look at how IT has been done, it is primarily IT is at the center of a managed infrastructure. You have applications that are supported by IT, you have data that are linked to those, then you have data flow down to the devices and then ultimately to users. Where this is changing is that increasingly there's more benefit to users owning their own device. So some of those benefits that they see are that they're happier with it, they tend to be more productive, they're more mobile and more flexible. So what we're moving away from in the previous slide is from an IT-centric model to a user-centric model. IT has to be able to deliver applications, they have to be able to deliver data to almost, or to literally virtually any device, and do that in a way that doesn't overtax the IT infrastructure or the support staff or compromise the security of the data. In that vein, the thing that organizations have expressed are the key issues is the device, the security of the device, the data leakage, and how do we deal with malware if people are bringing their own devices. The other the other statistic that we have is that about 94% of organizations will be looking at or implementing some sort of bring your own device policy by mid-2013. So what are the essentials of a bring your own device initiative, or rather into the data center? So starting with these initiatives and kind of looking at them, any device, personal or data, we're looking at universal access to apps. And this can be on PCs, it can be on tablets, or it can be on Macintoshes. Personally, I'm running this webinar from a Macintosh, so when we get to the point that we're demoing, you'll be able to see Windows 7 running in a virtual environment on a Mac. So Citrix's solution to this is desktop virtualization, and I'm going to spend a few minutes on this slide, but before I do, does anybody have any questions so far? Okay. Desktop virtualization is essentially the uncoupling of the traditional, or the decoupling of the traditional desktop application operating system data model, and breaking it up into pieces that can be delivered through some mechanism to a device anywhere on the planet. And Citrix's implementation of their way of doing this with Zen Desktop is to use a technology they refer to as FlexCast. What FlexCast basically does is it takes the operating system and the user's data, their applications and their user profile, and breaks it into components that are then reassembled, delivered through a high-definition protocol that is called HDX from Citrix, and then delivered to any device. So you can see in the slide that it can be a thin client, a PC, a Mac, a smart device, an iPod, or whatever. The interface for doing this is something called Storefront, which allows users to have access to a suite of, or a help yourself menu, if you will, of both applications and desktops. And I'll show this a little bit, we'll get more into this in the demo, but essentially what it provides for is a single sign-on. You log on once and you have access to your applications and your desktops. All of the desktops, web applications, and software service apps become accessible this way. The user can pick what they want. We can have integrated file synchronization and centralized management with the devices. And I'll talk about this a little bit. The synchronization piece actually happens a couple of ways. The thing to realize or to think about in a virtualized desktop environment is that the only thing the target device or the user's devices is, its only reason for being is to provide a way to interact with the environment. So the only data flowing back and forth are keystrokes, mouse clicks, and video. Everything else has been moved to the data center. One of the components of a Zen Desktop environment is something called Zen Client, which actually is a hypervisor that can be installed on a PC or a laptop, which allows you to take a copy of the virtual machine environment that exists in a VDI or Zen Desktop environment, bring a copy down to the local device, and let it run on that device even when an internet connection is not available. That the security that's embedded into that technology allows for that virtual machine to be time limited, so a user can have it for 2 days, 5 days, 30 days. You also have the ability, should somebody's laptop or roaming device be lost, you can initiate a kill pill at the data center so that if the PC is lost or stolen or the laptop is lost or stolen, when somebody else tries to log on, that virtual machine is automatically eradicated, so any data associated with it is wiped out. It has the benefit in that any that are automatically reflected back to the data center, and any changes made at the data center are updated or reflected in the user's environment. So a user in this using this technology could log off. While they're logged off, the data center applies a service pack to the version of Office or updates a version of an application, updates the virus definitions on the virtual machine. When the user reconnects, they automatically get all those updates synchronized back to their local device. So the idea is we want to have secure information going back and forth in a bring your own device type environment. And this slide illustrates how that works. You have this universal client, which is the Citrix receiver. It is an app for the iPad, it's an app for the Droid, the iPhone. It's a small downloadable plugin for a web browser on a PC or a Mac. And then we have that is used to connect to a secure gateway, which provides the entry point into the virtualized desktop environment, into the data center. Uses SSL encryption. It can actually be even configured to the degree that you can set up criteria that have to be met in order for that device to connect. You can establish guidelines like you have to be running Windows XP Service Pack 3, you have to have some sort of virus definition installed or virus software installed on the remote device. You can even get it very specific that you have to look for the presence of a particular file, which is a great way of sort of locking it down so that only your employees or only your staff or your group of supported users are getting access into the environment. Once you get through the network connectivity piece, then you're in the data center where all the desktops and the applications are virtualized. So it's a very convenient and simple way to get access in. Any questions so far? Okay, Citrix is two ways of dealing with bring your own device solutions. One is more sort of what I'll call a public cloud kind of an environment, and one is more sort of a private cloud type environment. In the public, Citrix has a product called ShareFile, which is similar to Dropbox and some of the other products like that, where files can be left and synchronized with a remote device. Then you have the Zen Client piece that we talked about a second ago, which is that layer 1 hypervisor. Either one of those from the target device then uses a receiver to connect to the data center environment through either a cloud gateway or NetScaler is Citrix's firewall solution. The other piece that we were talking about is that data center environment. Then we use Zen Desktop to deliver virtual desktops, Zen App to deliver applications, and VDI in a box that's sort of grayed out and kind of light here is actually a skinny down version of Zen Desktop that is designed to provide virtual desktops without the Zen App or the application delivery component. We good so far? Okay. Citrix is one of the first to initiate a Bring Your Own Device initiative, and this slide kind of talks about what they did. Essentially, their approach was they give their employees a stipend with which they can buy any device they want to use to access the environment. The only prerequisite for that is that whatever device they purchase needs to have a 3-year manufacturer's warranty on it so that they don't have to deal with any hardware issues. Because all of the virtual environment, all the desktops are living in a Zen Desktop environment in a data center, by not having to, standardization effectively becomes a non-issue because you're providing a standardized golden imaged desktop to all the users, regardless of what kind of device is on the other end. They implemented the BYOD initiative, did it with desktop and application virtualization, and follow me data I'll show when we get to the demo portion is basically move to another device or log onto an application and then move to a desktop. What you were doing follows you from device to device. The net gain on it is they got a 20% cost savings, and they found that there's a lot more flexibility for the user community, and obviously something that the folks really like using. Bring your own devices kind of take two different paths that we see. One is more of an informal path where users can access applications and data from their own device, and essentially the user brings whatever device they want to bring to it. To the other end of the spectrum, which is more along the lines of what Citrix did, which is more of a formal policy, where you can have a bring your own device policy, offer a stipend, provide the self-service website, and ongoing support for the user community. So in looking at how to implement or how to move forward with the Bring Your Own Device initiative, it essentially boils down to a relatively straightforward process that most of us have used in IT, which is first, we call it our 3D approach, or Discover, Design, Deploy. It's kind of a where am I going, and how am I going to get there? So what are users using, what applications do we need to deliver, how do we need to deliver it, from where do we need to deliver it, and what kind of security it needs to be implemented for that. Once that assessment of where you're at and where you want to be is done, then the next step is to design the solution. Look at the hardware and infrastructure requirements in order to support virtual desktop. Look at what's going to be required from both an ops side and from a technical support side, and then run some tests and see how it works. And once a proof of concept is completed and there's validation that the design is going to work for your needs, then you move straight on into deployment, which involves obviously getting it up and running and then training users on how to do it, running some sort of a pilot group typically, and then doing it as a phased rollout. This obviously is not technology that you say, okay, come Monday, everybody's going to be on this new thing. Citrix provides a lot of resources to facilitate this process. They have a CIO kit for Bring Your. We work with our clients a lot on doing demos and proof of concepts. There is a website that you can go to for information about Citrix's Bring Your Own Device initiative and their solution for those initiatives at citrixcom/BYOD. There are videos and analysis reports and case studies and so forth that you can kind of look at and go through. So the general overall objective is, to put it simply, we want any application on any device anywhere. So in creating an environment that supports that, we make it much simpler for Bring Your Own Device initiatives. Okay, what I've done here is I've logged on to a demo site that Citrix hosts at a data center up in Washington, D.C. And I've logged on to this site to kind of let you folks see what kinds of capabilities and so forth are here. Website that a user would get access to. So what's happening in the background here is that there are a couple of components in the Zen Desktop environment that are working together to deliver me this desktop. There's a communication happening between a connection broker, a provisioning server, which actually provisions the desktops, and the virtual environment that hosts them all. So it logs me on, creates my user profile, sets up my user settings, runs the group policies in the background, essentially does all the things that would normally happen when I'm logging on to a device from a PC, sets this all up, and then once it's completed, once the processes are run, it goes ahead and it will give me a Windows 7 environment to work with. And I'm in. So now from within it, what I've got here now is essentially a Windows 7 environment running on top of a Mac. If I were to, I can't do two devices, but if I were to now log on to this same environment from my iPad, it would transfer the desktop to my iPad and put me back at exactly the same place I was before. So if I open up a Word document, as an administrator, I'm not using a roaming profile over here, but if I log on now to a Word document, okay. So now I'm in and I can go about doing my business. So now if I were to, first spell correctly, and transfer this session to an iPad, when I went to the iPad or a Droid or a Zen Client or my PC at home, whatever device, the desktop that I would get would be exactly what I see in front of me right now. The desktop just transfers from one device to another. Okay, so now that I'm in the environment, if we go back over here real quick and look at the applications, you'll see all these folders that exist. And then with each folder, we have a variety of applications that are listed. Now that I've got a desktop up and running, if I go into the Start menu of my desktop, folders that are here are have been created and populated from the application virtualization environment, so that these aren't actually installed from the Zen app environment. So now I can go into my Autodesk review. And run the same application within this environment. Jason, are you guys seeing this okay?
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah. Okay, and so then now within here, I can pivot and manipulate and do whatever I want to do with this device. Because now what's happening here is that the graphics processor on the virtual host is providing the processing necessary in order to deal with these 3D graphics. Okay, well that pretty much concludes the presentation. We've gone through the steps, so I want to thank everybody for their time, and then Kate, I'll pass it back to you.
Great, thank you. All right, well, thank you guys, Steve and Jason, for people think it's bring your own dessert and don't even know what the acronym is. You know, so the clarification I think definitely helps, and like I said, if any of you have questions after today or need to get to know more about it, you are free to contact us anytime. This is my information. I can forward you all Steve and Jason's information as well. Thank you all for coming today, and look forward to seeing you at our next event.
Thanks very much.